Someone in your life is wearing a mask, and you don't see it yet. Not because they lie loudly, but because they deceive quietly. Carl Jung warned that the most dangerous people are not the obvious villains, but the ones who look supportive, charming, even harmless, while draining your confidence, your stability, and your sense of self, one subtle cut at a time. You don't lose to them because they overpower you. You lose because you underestimate them. Jung spent his life exposing the hidden side of human nature, the shadow, and he revealed 6 types of people who smile at you while slowly dismantling your life. Miss these signs, and you're their next target. See them clearly, and you take your power back. These are the 6 people Jung said you should never trust. Let's begin. 1. The chronic victim. This is the person who refuses to take responsibility for anything in their life. Every problem is someone else's fault. Every setback is an attack. Every situation places them as the one who has been wronged. At first, you naturally feel sympathy. You listen. You support. You try to help. You become emotionally involved in their recovery, believing they genuinely want to rise above their circumstances. But Jung understood this pattern with absolute clarity. People who live in constant victimhood are often hiding a deeper form of manipulation, because when you are always the victim, you never need to be accountable. You never need to grow or change. You never have to confront your own shadow, the darker parts of your personality. The chronic victim uses their suffering as a tool. Their pain becomes leverage. They guilt trip. They twist situations to make you feel responsible. They pull out your empathy and slowly turn it into obligation. You don't end up helping them. You end up carrying them. And here's the part most people miss. They don't actually want healing. Healing would remove the power they gain from helplessness. Healing would force them to face themselves. Healing would require accountability, and they avoid that at all costs. Jung warned that people who live in permanent victim mode are often fused with their shadow. Their manipulation isn't loud or obvious. It's emotional, subtle, and disguised as vulnerability. These people rarely change, because change means losing the only real influence they have over others, your pity. And if you don't step back, something dangerous happens. You begin to feel guilty simply because you're not broken like them. 2. The charming mirror. Jung called this the persona trap. It's the person who reflects back to you exactly what you want to see. In the beginning, they seem ideal. They agree with you. They support you. They laugh at your jokes. They admire your goals. They validate your insecurities. It feels like they're your biggest supporter. But slowly, you notice something strange. You don't actually know who they are. And the reason is simple. They're not showing their real self. They're mirroring you to gain your trust. Jung explained that when someone becomes too attached to their persona, the mask replaces their identity. The real self stays hidden and protected. It stays untouched and unaccountable. That's why the charming mirror is dangerous. They feel safe, but they're not real. Behind the mask, there's nothing solid. No substance, no stability, no consistent values. Only the ability to adapt, to mimic, and to impress. They're not loyal to you. They're loyal to your approval. And the moment you stop admiring them, they disappear. Or worse, they turn against you. Because you never met them. You met your own reflection in their performance. Trusting someone like that is like trying to hold smoke in your hands. 3. The passive-aggressive enabler. This one is subtle. They don't criticize you directly. They don't argue. They let you talk, they listen, and then they undermine you with small suggestions and quiet doubts. You share a dream, and they say things like, "Wow, that's ambitious. I just don't want you to be disappointed." Or, "You're so brave for trying that. I don't think I'd ever risk failing like that." It sounds supportive, but it isn't. Jung described this as the hidden shadow of the helper. They don't attack your choices. They erode your confidence. Slowly, through emotional hints. They disguise doubt as concern. They disguise fear as logic. They disguise judgment as maturity. And if you're not fully aware, you start absorbing their limitations as your own. Jung believed this type is especially dangerous because they pretend to empower you, while secretly making sure you never outgrow them. Because if you succeed without them, they lose influence, they lose relevance, and for them, that feels like a silent ego death. So, they clip your wings before you ever take flight. and they call it support. 4. The secret competitor. This person isn't competing with the world. They're competing with you, but never openly. They act like a friend. They clap for your success. They say they're happy for you. But every time something good happens to you, they find a way to shift the spotlight. They minimize your win. They redirect attention. They jump in with a story of their own. Just a little better, just a little more impressive. Jung believed this type is driven by unconscious inferiority. They don't hate you. They hate what you reflect in them, their own inadequacy. And instead of facing that feeling and growing from it, they compete in silence. They copy your ideas and pretend they were theirs. They give backhanded compliments. They only celebrate you when they feel ahead, never when you rise above them. You sense it in the tension, in the forced praise, in the tiny shifts in their tone. And if you ignore these signs, you'll keep trusting someone who sees you as a threat, not a friend. Here's the twist. When you fail, they feel relieved. They'll never admit it. They'll say things like, "I was afraid this might happen. I tried to warn you." This person is not a teammate. They're a mirror competitor who pretends to support you just to stay close enough to emotionally sabotage you. Jung warned, never trust someone who can't clap when it's not their turn to win. 4 out of 6 revealed. Each one more subtle than the last. Each one more dangerous the longer they stay hidden. Now we expose the final 2. The manipulative wise one and the seductive empath who hides control under compassion. Plus, how Jung believed these types form through early trauma and an unintegrated shadow, and why these final 2 are the hardest to detect, because they often appear wise, caring, or even healing. They don't control you through force. They control you through your need for love, growth, and clarity. Let's continue. 5. The spiritual narcissist, the wise one. This is the person who presents themselves as enlightened, mature, grounded, and emotionally advanced. They speak softly. They quote philosophy. They talk about healing, alignment, shadow work, and mindfulness. They act like they're above conflict and above ego. But the truth is different. They are deeply attached to being seen as superior. Jung would call this a split psyche. The conscious mind clings to a spiritual identity, while the unconscious shadow leaks out as quiet superiority, control, and judgment. Their danger isn't loud. They don't dominate you by arguing. They dominate by always being the calm one. Anytime you push back, they make you feel emotional, unhealed, or spiritually inferior. They say things like, "That sounds like a trigger you haven't dealt with yet. I'm just holding space. It's not my responsibility to fix your projection. You're still reacting. You have inner work to do." It sounds wise, but it's actually a power move. They use spiritual language to invalidate your reality. You can't win an argument with them because they'll never admit they're in one. You can't confront them because they'll frame your anger as a flaw in you. And the more aware you try to be, the more they shift the frame to stay above you. Calm, superior, untouchable. Jung warned about this type specifically because their wisdom is built on unintegrated ego. They didn't kill their ego. They just dressed it up in spirituality. They buried it under concepts and called it transcendence. The more you trust them to guide you, the more power they gain, not by helping you grow, but by keeping you small, uncertain, and dependent on their clarity. They don't want equals. They want students. They don't want healing. They want authority. And if you're not careful, you'll confuse their emotional stillness for depth, when in reality, it's just performance. 6. The empath who always ends up in control. Jung wrote often about projection, how people unconsciously assign their own needs, wounds, and intentions onto others. And the 6th type is a master of this, the empathic controller. They feel everything. They sense energy. They read moods, tension, body language, and subtext. They cry easily. They comfort you often. They make you feel deeply understood. At first, it feels like a gift. It feels like real connection. But over time, it becomes something else. Control through sensitivity. You start changing how you act so you don't upset them. You hold back your reactions so you don't hurt them. You avoid expressing frustration because they say things like, "That energy really affects me." And before you notice, You've stopped expressing yourself completely. You're no longer being honest, you're managing them, because they've convinced you that their pain is your fault. Jung warned about this subtle danger. Many people who claim to be highly sensitive are actually projecting their unhealed chaos outward and demanding that everyone else organize themselves around their wounds. This is where the empath becomes toxic. They don't want connection. They want emotional safety, at your expense. And when you fail to give it, they break down. Suddenly you are the bad guy. You're insensitive, you're cold, you're unstable, you're responsible for their spiral. But the truth is simple. It isn't your spiral. It's theirs. And they've never learned to hold it. So they place it on you. If you're not careful, you'll spend months, even years, trying to regulate someone who refuses to regulate themselves. You'll mistake emotional chaos for depth. You'll mistake sensitivity for purity. You'll mistake control for closeness. And by the time you see it clearly, your identity is wrapped around someone else's emotional storm. That's not love. That's psychological submission. Jung's advice was direct. Walk away. Because this type will never admit they're dangerous. They'll say they're just feeling too much. And unless you're deeply rooted in yourself, you'll start believing it. You'll believe their pain is your responsibility. Their chaos is your burden. Their breakdowns are your fault. But they're not. You didn't break them. You just got too close. The deeper warning begins here. Before we dive in, if this content resonates with you, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. Now that you've encountered all 6 types, you might wonder why these individuals exist. Why do they move through the world this way? Jung's answer is brutally straightforward. Because they never confronted their shadow. So now, they make you carry the weight of it. They never faced the manipulative part within themselves, so they project it onto you. They never acknowledged their need for control, so they control others in the name of love, support, or guidance. They never took ownership of their pain, so they made it your responsibility to repair. These individuals aren't uncommon. They're everywhere around us, and they flourish in environments where people haven't learned how to protect their energy. Jung believed the only real protection was self-awareness, to recognize the mask, to see past the kindness, to hear what remains unspoken, and to walk away before you need concrete evidence. Because once you perceive it, you cannot reverse that perception. Now, we'll move beyond the list into understanding how you stop drawing these people in, why your shadow causes you to tolerate them, and how to permanently become someone they cannot manipulate, exploit, or break. By this point, you've seen them. The 6 people. Carl Jung warned you should never fully trust, not because they're inherently evil, but because they're deeply unaware of their own nature. And when someone lacks awareness of their own shadow, they force you to exist within it. They become the perpetual victim, the charming mirror, the quiet enabler, the hidden competitor, the spiritual narcissist, the empathic controller. They don't always arrive to destroy you. They come to feed off you. To Jung, this wasn't a moral failing. This was a psychic pattern, a survival mechanism of the unconscious, attempting to hold itself together by externalizing pain, control, and emotional chaos. And if you don't recognize the pattern, you'll believe it's merely bad luck. You'll think you keep drawing in harmful people. You'll believe you're being punished. But Jung would tell you you're not being punished. You're being reflected. Because here's the genuine warning most people overlook. You attract what you haven't integrated. Let that penetrate deeply. If you're constantly attracting manipulators, there's a part of you that's still afraid to stand in your own truth. If you're always surrounded by victims, there's a part of you that needs to be needed to feel valuable. If you're constantly betrayed by charming individuals, you're still worshiping external validation more than internal clarity. That's why this isn't just about who to avoid. It's about why you allowed them in the first place. And Jung believed the answer always resides in one place, your shadow. The shadow attracts the mask. Jung taught that the shadow is everything you've suppressed, the parts of you that you were told were too much, too selfish, too intense, or not lovable enough. So you buried them deep. You became nice. You became helpful. You became agreeable. You became emotionally intelligent. You became whatever would earn you acceptance. But here's the exchange you made. You lost your edge. You lost your instincts. You lost your barrier against harm. Because when you suppress your anger, you tolerate disrespect. When you suppress your intuition, you ignore warning signs. When you suppress your self-protection, you keep allowing in the people who pretend to love you and then gradually consume you. Jung didn't want you to become cold. He wanted you to become whole. And to achieve that, you have to stop pretending that your love is limitless, that your patience is eternal, and that your trust should be freely distributed, because it shouldn't be. Not everyone deserves access to you, especially not the people who live unconsciously. Because here's the brutal reality. Some people are not learning. They're simply repeating. They've been the same for 10 years. They're not doing shadow work. They're not evolving. They're not growing alongside you. They're just adapting their language to conceal their same old patterns. And unless you become the kind of person who values inner alignment over outer harmony, you will keep bending for people who wouldn't stretch an inch for you. What to do now? If this message struck you deeply, good. It means something within you is awakening. It means you're finished being easy to manipulate. It means the old version of you, the one who needed to be liked, needed to fix others, needed to feel good, is finally exhausted. So here's how you move forward. 1. Audit your circle. Start asking yourself, who drains me? Who confuses me? Who am I constantly explaining myself to? If someone constantly needs context just to treat you properly, they're not confused. They're avoiding accountability. Release them silently, without guilt. Jung believed withdrawal is one of the strongest acts of consciousness. Not because you hate them, but because you've stopped abandoning yourself to maintain peace. 2. Let your shadow speak. Stop attempting to be perfect. Allow yourself to say no. Allow yourself to get angry. Allow yourself to question people's intentions. Your shadow isn't evil. It's protective. It's the part of you that remembers who you are when you're being emotionally gaslit into forgetting. Let that part rise. Jung said one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. If you want peace, stop performing for it. Integrate the part of you that can walk away, that can set a boundary, that can say I'm not available for this anymore. 3. Stop explaining. The people who deserve your energy won't need you to justify your boundaries. They'll sense them, they'll respect them, and they'll match you with their own clarity. But the toxic ones will demand explanations. They'll guilt-trip you. They'll paint you as the problem. Let them. Jung didn't believe in convincing unconscious people to see your light. He believed in becoming so grounded in yourself that their confusion no longer slows you down. 4. Trust what you felt the first time. Most people aren't confused. They're just hoping they're wrong. But you weren't. That moment you felt the energy shift. That moment you hesitated before trusting. That moment your gut said something's off here. That wasn't paranoia. That was your subconscious reading patterns before your mind caught up. Start listening to it. Because the people Jung warned us about don't show up with warning signs. They show up with flattery. They show up with emotional stories. They show up with alignment and vulnerability and healing talk. But time always reveals the truth. And when it does, you better be far enough away that it no longer costs you anything. The final word. Carl Jung didn't want you to fear the world. He wanted you to stop fearing your own knowing. The more shadow you integrate, the fewer toxic people get close. Not because you're hiding, but because your energy no longer gives them entry. You stop explaining. You stop fixing. You stop justifying your standards. And without ever raising your voice, you become someone no manipulator can reach, no narcissist can fool, no competitor can rattle, because you are now the person Jung wanted you to be. Awake, whole, and impossible to trick.